What happens when you are so close to the truth, yet you choose to believe the lie your own eyes have shown you? When does love become so heavy that the only way to breathe is to let it go, even if it breaks you? How much of a person's heart must be hidden before the world decides they are not worthy of yours? In the vibrant, dusty heart of a bustling West African city, a young woman made the quiet, painful decision to walk away from the love she thought had failed. The air was thick with the promise of rain, mirroring the storm gathering in her soul. The stakes were simple: trade stability for love, or choose peace over passion. This isn't just a story about a breakup. It is a powerful tale about the distance between superficial appearance and profound purpose, the difference between seeing a man and seeing his soul. Before her world was flipped on its head by an unbelievable secret, there was Esther. A talented architect with a life planned meticulously down to the very last detail. Welcome to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every truth demands to be heard. Now, before we begin, where in the world are you watching from? Is it morning in Lagos, evening in Nairobi, or midnight in London? Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Now, lean in. Because this isn't just about what happened, it's about what it means when the man you love turns out to be a mystery. The evening sun, a bruised orange globe, bled across the cracked pavement of the suburb of Yonopoja. Esther sat in the taxi, her fingers tight around the worn leather strap of her handbag, not looking out at the familiar chaos, but inward at the quiet, aching chaos of her own mind. For 2 years, she had built a life with Gabriel. A gentle, kind, funny man whose only flaw, it seemed, was his complete inability to rise above his meager circumstances. He was a good man, everyone agreed, but being good did not pay the rent for the apartment she truly wanted, nor did it fund the wedding of her dreams. Her meticulously planned life was running out of time, and Gabriel, a humble high school teacher who struggled to afford new shoes, was the anchor that held her family in the harbor of mediocrity. She loved him, the ache in her chest was proof enough of that, but a different kind of love, a love for the life she deserved, was winning. This week, she would tell him goodbye. Her heart was a lead weight as the taxi pulled up to the small, unpainted house he rented, the only one on the street that still had a leaky, corrugated iron roof. She saw him immediately. Gabriel. He was wearing the same faded blue shirt, his face covered in a sheen of sweat, not from heat, but from effort. He was bent over an old, splintered wooden table, meticulously repairing a bicycle wheel for a small boy, perhaps 9 or 10, who stood next to him, watching with wide, adoring eyes. Gabriel had many side hustles, fixing phones, tutoring maths, even mending clothes for the local tailor, all to make ends meet. Every hustle felt like a fresh reminder to Esther of how far he was from her own dream of an executive life. She paid the taxi driver and stepped out, her expression a careful mask of polite detachment, the kind of look you give a stranger. Esther. My queen. Gabriel's face lit up with a blinding, honest joy that momentarily cracked her resolve. He wiped his hands on a rag and rushed to her, his arms open. She flinched almost imperceptibly as he tried to hug her, a small, cold withdrawal that did not escape his notice. He dropped his arms slowly, his smile fading into a confused concern. Is everything all right? Your eyes, they look like a stormy sea. Esther forced a smile, shaking her head. Nothing, my love. Just tired from work. I need to get inside. The small boy, now with his fixed bicycle, called out a thank you, his voice full of reverence. Gabriel simply ruffled his hair and waved him off, never asking for a payment. That was Gabriel, always giving, never calculating the cost to himself. This, she realized with a fresh wave of despair, was the very thing she could no longer bear. He gave his time away freely, and time, to Esther, was the most precious commodity he was wasting. As they entered the tiny, sparsely furnished living room, the air grew thick with unspoken things. Gabriel watched her as she moved, her movement stiff, unnatural. He reached for her hand, but she pulled it back gently, claiming she needed to change out of her work clothes. "I bought you a gift," she lied, needing an excuse to buy herself more time. "I left it in my car. I'll go and fetch it." She needed to breathe, to rehearse the carefully constructed speech she had planned, the one that began, "Gabriel, you deserve someone who can appreciate you exactly as you are," but she couldn't. Not yet. She walked back outside, her eyes scanning the small compound for a moment of solitude. That's when she saw it, an old, heavy metal shed tucked away in the very back corner, a structure she had walked past 100 times without a second thought. She had never been inside that shed. Gabriel always kept it padlocked, muttering vague excuses about it being his storage for tools. In her mind, she pictured rusty car parts, broken furniture, the detritus of a man unable to throw anything away. But today, the lock was not fully clicked closed. A narrow, dark gap was visible where the door met the frame. A flicker of curiosity, then something darker, a desperate hope for a secret, a fault, something tangible to justify her impending departure, made her move. She pushed the door open just a crack. The light was faint, but what she saw inside did not match her expectations of a tool shed. There were stacks of books, not rusty tools, and a large, oddly shaped object covered by a thick, patterned blanket. Her heart began to pound, slow and heavy, against her ribs. She took a deep breath, and slid fully into the cool, silent darkness of the shed, ready to find the excuse she needed. Inside the shed, the air was still and smelled faintly of old paper and wood shavings. Esther's eyes adjusted to the gloom. She saw the books first, dozens of them, stacked high, their spines faded but their contents obviously cherished. They were not novels or textbooks, they were books on advanced mathematics, engineering, and architectural theory, subjects far beyond the scope of a high school teacher. She picked one up, Structural Dynamics and Vibration Control. A page fell open, and on the margin, Gabriel's familiar, elegant handwriting covered the space in complex, sprawling equations and intricate sketches. Her stomach churned with a sudden, confusing mix of guilt and panic. Why would Gabriel, who struggled to afford bus fare, be hoarding and studying such advanced material in secret? It was almost as if he was leading a double life. Then she turned to the large, covered object. Her hands trembled as she reached out and pulled back the heavy, patterned blanket. Beneath it was a beautiful, fully functional 3D printer, the kind that cost more than Gabriel earned in a year. The machine sat on a workbench surrounded by tiny, perfectly sculpted plastic prototypes of bridges, dome structures, and residential buildings, all architectural models of breathtaking complexity and detail. These weren't the simple lesson aids of a teacher, they were the works of a master craftsman, a visionary. She recognized one of the small models instantly. It was a prototype of the community learning center that her own architectural firm, where she was fighting for a promotion, was failing to get off the ground. A small, rolled-up sheet of paper was pinned to the wall above the workbench. She unrolled it, her breath catching in her throat. It was a formal letterhead from the City Development Authority, dated just 3 days ago. Her eyes scanned the text. "We are delighted to inform the esteemed Mr. Gabriel Okoro that his design submission for the Ionopoja Youth Center, under the anonymous pseudonym Architect X, has been overwhelmingly selected as the winning entry. The committee was particularly impressed by the design's cost-effective structural integrity and its innovative use of sustainable, locally sourced materials." The letter went on to detail a generous financial grant that would cover all of Gabriel's immediate financial needs and establish him as a consultant on the project. Gabriel, her struggling, poverty-stricken boyfriend, had secretly won the biggest architectural contract in the neighborhood. Tears, hot and immediate, stung her eyes, but they were not tears of joy, they were tears of shame. She hadn't just misjudged his financial standing, she had completely failed to see the measure of the man. The truth was not that he was lazy or unambitious, the truth was that he had been working tirelessly, not for money, but for purpose. He had deliberately chosen to work under an alias, choosing to use his gift to help his community first, only asking for the funds needed to start the project, and nothing more for himself. His secret was not a mistress or a debt, but a burning, quiet, world-changing genius that he shielded from the world's commercial greed. Esther had been ready to leave him for not being enough, when in reality, he was exponentially more than she could ever have imagined. The crumpled-up list of all his small hustles that she had laughed at in her mind suddenly took on a new light. He wasn't fixing bicycles for pocket money, he was fixing a broken community, one small act of kindness at a time, using his simple, daily work as a cover so that the community board would not be intimidated by his true identity as a high-flying architect. He wore old shoes because the money he could have used for new ones was being saved for printer filament and books. He didn't share his secret because his mission was not for applause or profit, but for service. Esther clutched the letter, her hands shaking, her entire body trembling with the weight of her misunderstanding. The painful realization was that her love was conditional, based on his public success, while his success was built on a foundation of anonymous sacrifice. She had been judging him by his wallet, while he was changing the world with his mind. Suddenly, the doorknob turned, and the shed door squeaked open, bathing the hidden workshop in a blinding shaft of orange light. Gabriel stood in the doorway, framed by the sunset, the fading light illuminating the deep worry in his eyes. He wasn't angry, not even shocked that she had discovered his secret. He simply looked defeated, as if his protective shield had finally been shattered. "Esther," he said softly, his voice a low rumble. "I was wondering where you went." He stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over the models, the 3D printer, and finally settling on the letter she still held crumpled in her hand. The silence was heavy, charged with all the things she couldn't take back. Her speech, the one about how he wasn't ambitious enough, was now ashes in her mouth. She dropped the letter and sank onto a wooden stool, her head bowed in profound, devastating humiliation. I was going to leave you, Gabriel," she whispered, the confession tearing from her soul. "I came here to tell you that you weren't enough. That your life wasn't going anywhere. I was so focused on the things you didn't have that I never stopped to see the man you truly were." She lifted her tear-streaked face to him, her eyes pleading for a kind of forgiveness she knew she didn't deserve. "I thought you were wasting your potential. I thought you were just a struggling teacher, when all along, you were designing the future. You were Architect X." Gabriel walked over to her, but instead of reproach, he extended a hand and gently lifted her chin. His eyes were not scornful, but compassionate. "My queen," he began, his voice laced with the quiet authority she had never heard before. "I never hid my life from you, only my identity. I kept the name a secret not for myself, but for the work. If I had announced I was a successful architect, the community board would have assumed I was looking for a big contract, not a community service project. They would have built the most expensive version. I wanted them to choose the best design, Esther, not the most powerful architect. I needed to work on the terms of the people, not the terms of the market." He paused, his thumb gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "The money, the fame, it will come, but the purpose had to come first. I wanted to build a legacy, not just a career. And I needed to know, truly know, that the woman I married valued the heart of the man, not the weight of his bank account." The words struck her with the force of a physical blow. Her ambition, once a strength, now felt like a curse. She had been ready to sacrifice a king for a kingdom, not realizing he was already building a better one. She looked around the small shed, no longer seeing a humble storeroom, but a sanctuary of genius and selflessness. She saw the true price of his old clothes and simple life, a community center that would stand for generations. With a raw, desperate sob, Esther pulled him close, holding him with a fierce protectiveness she had never felt before. This was not the broken man she planned to leave, this was the man whose integrity had made her world look shallow. "Forgive me," she choked out, holding on as if he might still vanish. I judged you by the wrong measure. I will support your vision. I will learn to value what you value. Gabriel simply held her, the scent of wood and honest sweat filling her lungs. There is nothing to forgive, my love, he murmured into her hair. You were just looking for security. Now you have found something far more valuable than that. She pulled back, her eyes shining with a new, fierce clarity. So, Architect X, she whispered, a genuine smile finally breaking through the tears. When do we start building the future? He returned her smile, a spark of the old, familiar joy returning to his eyes. He took her hand and led her out of the shed and back into the compound, where the first heavy drops of the promised rain were finally beginning to fall, washing the dust from the street and the shame from her soul. Esther never became an executive in her old firm. Instead, she joined Gabriel, bringing her corporate skills to his community-focused vision. 5 years later, she stood next to him as they opened their 10th youth center, a tangible testament to their shared belief that true worth is measured not by wealth, but by service. She knew she had chosen correctly. Not because of the comfortable life they now shared, but because she chose with her heart. This is the simple, powerful truth: a heart that chooses love over luxury, character over cash, and purpose over prestige, will never lead you wrong. If this story moved you, hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments, what would you choose, wealth without love, or love without a need for wealth? Subscribe to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every choice carries a lesson. This is Stories by the King, where love wins, and purpose finds its home.